Chapter 181, Tyrone's Gift. Tyrone paced around his room, looking incredibly unsettled as he wore a deep frown. How come they look so similar? Is it just a coincidence? His forehead creased the more he thought about it. If I remember correctly, I think there was something going on between Lucas and her almost 2 decades ago. Is it possible that Alaric is there? As he thought of this, his eyes widened. This cannot be. He wanted to deny it, but he realized that it wasn't impossible. There had been rumors about the relationship between Lucas and that person, but news about this suddenly disappeared as if someone had deliberately concealed them. Tyrone rubbed his chin as he took his seat. I will try probing Lucas tomorrow. If my speculation is right, I might uncover something huge. The next day, Alaric completed his daily mission after several hours of doing intense exercises. Alaric Silversword, Elite Knight, EXP, 163, 169/1000. Potential, A. Traits, Horseback Riding, C. Swordsmanship, SSS, Close Combat, C. Archery, E. Hunting, E. Tracking, E. Sixth Sense, E. Monster Affinity, F. Mana Gathering, C. Appraisal, B. Strength, 170. Stamina, 180. Agility, 180. Vitality, 150. Endurance, 160. Mana, 228, 230. Battle points, 1920, 1960. Stat points, 61, 67. Requirements for the next advancement, 1000 EXP, 250 in all attributes, and 10,000 battle points. My lord, please drink some water. The faithful little servant, Elena, handed him a leather water flask. Alaric smiled at her, grabbed the water flask, and took a swig. While he was drinking water, Elena expertly wiped off the sweat on his body with a cloth. She had always done this for him every time he would complete his training. Meanwhile, Hershey, who was standing behind them, spoke to Elena in a gentle voice. You are really good at this. Elena turned her head and squeezed out a smile. I have been by my lord's side since we were young, so it's almost second nature to me. I see. It seems like your relationship with Alaric is not that simple. Hershey stared deeply at her while keeping a smile on her face. Elena was flustered by her words and she hurriedly explained herself. It's not what you think, my lady. We are just dash. Ha ha ha. Hershey suddenly giggled when she saw how anxious she was. She grabbed Elena's hand and said, I know and I understand. Looking at her earnest expression, Elena gradually calmed down. Stop teasing her. Alaric smiled at the two women. While they were chatting, they suddenly noticed that someone was approaching them. They simultaneously turned their heads and saw that it was the old Marquis. Just like how they had met him yesterday, the old man still had this jovial look and easygoing smile. Alaric, Hershey, and the others quickly stopped what they were doing to greet him. Greetings, my lord. Tyrone nodded and swept his gaze over the small crowd before his eyes stopped on Alaric. Lord Alaric, I apologize for abruptly leaving yesterday. Because of my age, I sometimes feel dizzy. He had an apologetic look. I hope you can forgive me. Hearing this, Alaric immediately waved his hand and replied. It is fine, my lord. Your health is more important, so you do not need to worry about these trivial things. He knew that the old man was just giving an excuse, but he didn't expose him. The old Marquis grinned at his words. Oh, I almost forgot. I was not able to come to your birthday celebration, but I have prepared a gift for you. As he said this, he nodded to the servant standing next to him. The servant opened the wooden box he was carrying, revealing a set of intricately crafted armor. This is a relic-level battle armor made from mithril and other valuable materials like the disaster-grade monster hide. It is also engraved with the fortification trait that makes its wearer take less damage from any form of attack. The old Marquis introduced the armor's ability as he gestured at the servant to hand the gift to Alaric. A relic-level battle armor. Alaric was pleasantly surprised. This was what he needed the most. The battle armor he was using was also well made, but it wasn't at the relic level. If he had this armor, his combat ability would drastically improve. Thinking about this, he stared at the old Marquis who was gesturing at him to take the armor. It was a gift from his old superior, so he didn't hesitate any further and took the battle armor. "Thank you for the gift, my lord. I will cherish it." Alaric gratefully smiled at him. "Haha. I am glad that you like it." Tyrone laughed heartily. For some reason, he felt that Alaric wasn't a stranger, but someone that he knew for a long time. Who would not like a relic-level battle armor? Alaric smiled bitterly while shaking his head. Equipment like this was hard to come by in the north, but they were in abundance in the central areas of Estania. It is just a battle armor. There is no need to make a fuss over it. The Marquis chuckled. Alaric smiled wryly. Only a high-level noble like the old Marquis could say something like this. "How about we talk somewhere more quiet, my lord? I do not think the warriors can train peacefully knowing that you are here," Alaric suggested. "All right. I will follow you." Tyrone nodded in agreement. There were some things that he wanted to discuss with him, but the details were too sensitive to be said in public. Alaric brought the old man to his study inside the main mansion. For absolute secrecy, he didn't let anyone in. "Please take a seat, my lord." Alaric pointed at a vacant seat. The old man thanked him before he took his seat. "So what do you want to discuss with me, Lord Alaric?" Tyrone didn't beat around the bush. Alaric cleared his throat and gathered his thoughts before he spoke. "I noticed that my lord was surprised when you saw me yesterday. It just made me curious." The old man's face suddenly turned serious. He adjusted his sitting posture before he calmly replied. "I just thought that you look like someone I know." Alaric raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. The old man's words had many implications. "Can you elaborate on what you mean by this?" The old man shook his head. "To be honest with you, I am also not sure, so it would be for the best if I do not say anything more than that." "I see. What a pity." Alaric shook his head with a look of regret. He was curious, but he didn't probe further. There was plenty of time to know the truth. He just needed to patiently wait. Tyrone observed the young man's expression. It seems like he is still unaware of this. Lucas might have kept it a secret from him. It is also possible that I am wrong about the whole thing. The two talked about other matters to lighten the mood. Alaric was already familiar with the old man's personality, so he knew which topics would entertain him. After a few hours of conversation, the Marquis stood up and said, "I still have an appointment with Lord Lucas. Please excuse me, my lord." "Oh, that is too bad. I really enjoyed talking with you, Lord Tyrone. I hope we can chat again sometime." Alaric didn't stop the old man from leaving. He bid the Marquis farewell and sent him to Lucas's study. Meanwhile, a group of robed individuals entered through a secret passage that led them to Turtle Fort. "Your Highness, why don't we rest here for a while? You must be weary from the trip," Neo suggested while staring at the figure leading them. To safely reach this place, they had taken numerous detours. There were scattered goblin outposts in the enchanted woodlands, so they wasted a lot of time trying to evade them. "There is no need." Ivana shook her head. A few days had passed since they left the Elven Kingdom. She was afraid that the war had already started, so she couldn't afford to rest. "Our kingdom is in danger, so we must hurry," Ivana muttered. Neo no longer said anything. He was also worried about the kingdom. "Split up to gather supplies and return to this spot within 30 minutes," Ivana instructed. As soon as she gave the order, the elven warriors who had followed them went in separate directions. Only Neo stayed behind to protect Ivana. The elven princess was only a one-ringed beast soul master. A powerful knight could already put her in danger, so he didn't want to leave her side. "Elder Neo, tell me honestly, since you have also witnessed the military power of House Silversword. Do you think we can repel those goblins if we have their support? Ivana asked all of a sudden. Hearing this, Neo thought for a moment before shaking his head. It's hard to say, Your Highness. We have no accurate information on the goblin colony. There could be powerful goblins hiding there. Chapter 182, Blood River Alliance Leader. In Riverwake, the restless underground factions had gradually stabilized. This was because the three largest factions had merged to create a much larger group, the Blood River Alliance. Today, on the 6th of April in the year 209 of the Estanian calendar, the Alliance members gathered inside a private building to elect their leader. 3 people sat at the most prominent location, chatting as they waited for the election to begin. In just a few days, we managed to take full control of Riverwake's underground forces. With Baron Dagzo gone, I don't think there's anyone who can stop our alliance's expansion, remarked Old Man Woodcutter with a grin. When he first joined the alliance, he still had some misgivings, but after some time, he gradually became invested in the group. The idea of controlling the entire city made him forget all the bad things that happened. The middle-aged man sitting adjacent to him sneered at his words and offered his own opinion. It's not as easy as you think. Although Baron Dagzo has died, his barony started functioning again after his son took the reins. Furthermore, there are still some merchant groups with strong military power. This person was the leader of the Night Owl mercenary group, Tim. He was a former slave who had rebelled against his owner and took control of his wealth after killing him. And with his newfound wealth, he took in many slaves and commoners to create his mercenary group, which later became known as the Night Owl mercenary group. Tim was a ruthless man, and he was also skilled with the sword. Because of this, he later got the moniker One-Eyed Swordsman. Clap. The sudden clap made the two turn their heads to Liam. We shouldn't argue today, gentlemen. Look. Liam pointed at the large number of people gathered inside the building. Everyone has gathered here to elect the leader of our alliance. We must maintain our dignity in front of these people. He had learned to speak in a commoner's accent after months of contact with all sorts of individuals, but he still sometimes revealed the temperament of a noble. Old Man Woodcutter and One-Eyed Swordsman had complicated feelings about this young man. They were afraid of his cunning mind, and they also disliked his arrogance. However, there was something they admired about him, his ability to gather all sorts of people. No one would have imagined that the 3 largest factions in Riverwake would merge, but this young man made it happen. He might have employed some unusual methods, but he managed to do it. Until now, they still didn't know his name, so they called him Sly Demon, a moniker that recently became famous in Riverwake. Hearing his words, Old Man Woodcutter shrugged and no longer said anything, while One-Eyed Swordsman snorted. Seeing how cooperative they were, Liam smiled. He then sent the signal to start the election. The election process was simple. Each member of the alliance would write the name of the person they wanted to vote for and place it inside the box. The total votes would then be tallied on the spot to prevent cheating. The voting process only took less than 20 minutes, but the counting of the votes took much longer. The alliance had over 300 members, including the small groups that they had absorbed. About 2 hours later, the results were finally announced. Sly Demon, 217 votes. One-Eyed Swordsman, 164 votes. Old Man Woodcutter, 158 votes. A few people also received votes, but their vote counts were too low to even be compared with the 3 top candidates. One-Eyed Swordsman glanced at the results and slumped on his chair while crossing his arms. How did he gather so many supporters in just a few days? Did he bribe them with money? His faction was the largest in the alliance, so he was quite confident in his success, but from the looks of it, someone had come prepared. Meanwhile, Old Man Cutter was vexed. He couldn't accept the fact that he came third in the voting results. I can still accept Sly Demon being the winner, but this one-eyed bastard actually got more votes than me. These people must be blind. Humph. Old Man Woodcutter snorted the more he thought about the results. He felt that it was ridiculous. On the other hand, Liam seemed to have expected this to happen. He let out a smile as he stood up from his seat. He then walked toward the center of the venue and clapped his hands to gather everyone's attention. Everyone. Thank you to those who believed in me. I promise that I will use every means necessary to make our alliance stronger and more prosperous. However, I wouldn't be able to do this alone. I hope that everyone gathered here will put more effort into making the alliance more successful. Liam didn't make his speech longer since he knew that these boorish people wouldn't like it. He kept everything short and ended it with a strong message. After his speech, the alliance members clapped their hands. Although some still couldn't accept the results, there was nothing they could do. The majority had already spoken, so everyone had to follow the newly elected alliance leader. Congratulations on becoming the alliance leader. Old Man Woodcutter beamed at him. One-Eyed Swordsman didn't say anything and just nodded at Liam. That was how Liam Paxley became the leader of the Blood River Alliance. Inside the Baron's study in the main mansion of House Silversword, Tyrone took a light sip of tea before he asked. Lord Lucas, do you still remember Her Highness, Princess Jade Christine? The atmosphere suddenly turned heavy as soon as he spoke this name. Lucas had subconsciously released his aura, but he quickly retracted it after realizing what had happened. He stared deeply at the Marquis and responded. I still remember her. His voice was calm, but the old Marquis sensed the coldness in his tone. I see. That means Alaric must be her. Chapter 183, Princess Jade's Child. Alaric must be her child. This time, an even more powerful pressure descended upon the old Marquis. Tyrone acted like nothing happened and continued to sip his tea. Lucas let out a sigh. He leaned on his chair and rubbed his nose bridge as he said. That's right. Alaric is our son. His tone contained a trace of melancholy when he recalled the image of that woman. She was his first love and also his biggest regret. Tyrone wasn't surprised by his confirmation. Only a few had seen Her Highness, so I don't think someone will get suspicious of Alaric's identity, but you must still be careful. Some people might harbor ill intent if they discover his identity. Lucas nodded with a grave look. I understand. This was the real reason why he rejected the Emperor's offer 2 decades ago. He didn't want Alaric to be embroiled in the imperial family's woes and schemes. No wonder you rejected His Majesty's offer, so it was because of this. Tyrone stared at the Baron with newfound respect. For the sake of his son's safety, he rejected a high-ranking position and chose to live in the north as a Baron. Lucas took a deep breath and raised his head as he asked. Jade. Her Highness, where is she? His voice quivered when he mentioned her name. Other than his family, only this woman could make him this emotional. Tyrone sighed and shook his head. Her Highness hasn't shown herself to the public since you left Cadera. In truth, he knew something about the princess, but the information was yet to be confirmed since the imperial family was tight-lipped about the matter. I wonder how you will react if you hear that Princess Jade will be married to the crown prince of the neighboring empire of Harun. Lucas, will you barge into the imperial castle and face the wrath of both empires? Tyrone felt that he might really do it. Lucas was powerful enough to stand on the same ground with the powerhouses of Estania, and House Silversword was no longer the countryside barony that it was before. Is that so? Lucas let out a heavy breath. Jade, where are you? He thought that he could forget everything about her, but fate seemed to be intent on drawing them together. Lord Lucas, if you are thinking of seeing her, then you better drop the idea. The imperial family is currently unstable because of His Majesty's failing health. There might be severe consequences if you go and look for her. Tyrone warned him with a grim face. Lucas clenched his fists upon hearing this, but he knew that the old Marquis was telling the truth. Thank you for your warning, Lord Tyrone. I am tired, so I will excuse myself. Let us speak again tomorrow. He didn't wait for the old man's response. He stood up, cupped his fists at the Marquis, and decisively left. To think that the man known as the Shield of the North has a side like this. Tyrone drank the last sip of his tea before he left the room. On the 8th of April, the Marquis left North Pine Town and headed back to Cadera. He didn't know how he should report the situation to the Crown Prince. There was something within him that compelled him not to disclose this information, but a part of him also wanted to give this crucial information to Prince Leonard. What a conundrum. The old Marquis sighed while shaking his head. Things have become more complicated with Alaric in the picture. He has the blood of Astania running through his veins, and with House Silversword's growing popularity, there might be some people who would support him if he ever decides to join the battle for succession. He could already imagine the chaos that would ensue if this information leaked out. The Crown Prince might let things be, but the second prince would definitely not allow another contender to participate. While he was deep in his thoughts, he suddenly sensed the presence of a few powerful individuals approaching him at a fast pace. The old Marquis didn't come alone, but he only brought a few subordinates with him. One three-ringed beast soul master and the rest are elite knights and knights. He narrowed his eyes as he looked in a certain direction. He also signaled his men to stop and prepare for battle. Tyrone grabbed the handle of his sword while keeping his gaze on the approaching figures. I only brought 2 elite knights with me and 8 knights. If we fight those people, it will be a dangerous battle. Suddenly, the approaching group finally came into everyone's view. They were dressed in oversized robes that covered their whole body from head to foot. Strangely, they were using mana to increase their movement speed. It was as if someone was chasing them. Tyrone could sense the fluctuations of mana, so he was perplexed. He then signaled his subordinates to lower their weapons. He couldn't sense any hostility from the group, so to prevent misunderstandings, he instructed his men to stand down. Soon, the approaching group stopped in front of them, making the atmosphere a bit tense. If it weren't for Tyrone's command, his subordinates would have already drawn their weapons. I am Marquis Tyrone Agalsatar. State your identities. The old Marquis stared deeply at the person who had the strongest aura. He felt that this guy was the leader of the group. However, to his surprise, the one who stepped up was the person with the weakest aura, a one-ringed beast soul master. I am Ivana, a friend of Alaric Silversword. We mean you no harm. Ivana? I have not heard of anyone noteworthy with that name. Who is this young lady? Could she be Alaric's lover? The Marquis had question marks on his face, but he decided not to probe further. I see. Then you may go. You guys look like you are in a hurry. He waved his hand. Thank you. Ivana's group didn't linger for long and they left after she thanked the old man. Tyrone watched them disappear with a deep frown. Who are those people? Chapter 184, Ivana seeks help. Ivana's group arrived at the estate. Who are you? The gatekeepers warily glanced at her group, their hands resting on the handle of their weapons. Ivana didn't waste any time and presented a token. I am Ivana, a friend of Alaric. Please let us in. The gatekeepers were surprised to see the token in her hand. It was Alaric's identity token, which only he and a few of his most trusted subordinates possessed. Having this token means that you are one of his people. Can we inspect your token for a moment? The gatekeepers cautiously asked. They had heard of her name too, but they wanted to make sure that she wasn't a fraud. Ivana nodded as she handed over token. The gatekeepers took the token and inspected it carefully. After a thorough examination, they realized that it was real. This is Lord Alaric's identity token. They hurriedly handed it back to Ivana and apologized. Please pardon us for the inconvenience, my lady. It is all right. Just let us in. We are in a hurry. Ivana waved her hand dismissively. The gatekeepers no longer wasted their time. They opened the gates and escorted them to the training ground. Why are we heading here? Ivana frowned. Sensing the suspicion in her voice, the guard quickly explained. It's like this, my lady. Lord Alaric usually visits the training ground around this time for his daily training. He also observes the progress of our trainees. Ivana's expression eased up when she heard this. I see. Not long later, they arrived at the training grounds, and just like the guard had said, Alaric was there watching the trainees. As if having sensed their arrival, Alaric turned his head. Ivana Greenwood, 1 Ringed Beast Soul Master, EXP, 7/500. Potential, S. Integrated Monster Trait, Nature's Blessing, S. Traits, Horseback Riding, E. Archery, B. Swordsmanship, B. Close Combat, F. Strength, 11. Stamina, 10. Agility, 26. Endurance, 12. Vitality, 30. Mana, 79. Alaric raised an eyebrow when he saw her integrated monster trait. It was actually rated S. Just what kind of monster did they prepare for her monster trait integration? He was speechless. Only an elven princess could have this kind of luxury. He then moved his gaze toward the elf who had exuded the most oppressive aura. Neo, 3 Ringed Beast Soul Master, EXP, 3379/5000. Potential, A. Integrated Monster Traits, Ice Manipulation, A. Starlight Arrow, S. Eagle's Viewpoint, B. Traits, Horseback Riding, A. Swordsmanship, A. Archery, A. Hunting, B. Tracking, B. Close Combat, B. Strength, 189. Stamina, 196. Agility, 299. Endurance, 195. Vitality, 250. Mana, 511. Alaric was dumbfounded when he saw his attributes. His stats were even more outrageous than the bishop's. Not to mention his high-rated traits and integrated monster traits. Alaric. Ivana called out to him, but the cheerfulness she had the last time she came here was gone. Her voice pulled him from his thoughts. He sensed that something was amiss when he heard the tone of her voice. "Let's speak privately." Ivana nodded. She signaled her men to stay before she followed Alaric toward the main mansion. Neo hesitated for a moment before he decided to follow them. Meanwhile, Elena and Hershey, who were together with Alaric, decided not to disturb them. Once they arrived at his study, Alaric gestured for her to take a seat. Upon sitting down, Ivana removed the hood that covered her face. Seeing the deep frown and her troubled expression, Alaric asked, "What happened? Why do you look like that?" "Alaric, you are my friend, so I will not hide it from you." She took a short pause to gather her thoughts before she continued. "Our kingdom is in danger." Alaric narrowed his eyes. "Go on. I am listening." "A goblin colony has set their sights on our kingdom's mana spring. Those despicable creatures are gathering the scattered goblin tribes to attack us. We do not have much time. At this moment, they should." She explained the situation to him. As he listened, Alaric's expression grew increasingly colder. "Since you came all the way here, am I right to assume that you need my help?" He stared at the elven princess. Ivana didn't deny it. She nodded with a heavy look. "Our kingdom will face heavy casualties if we fight the goblin colony by ourselves. I was hoping that you could lend us some assistance." Alaric was silent for a moment. "From what she told me, there are over 20,000 goblins in the colony and her kingdom's military is outnumbered. Our house Silversword alone cannot offer much help even if we mobilize 3 transcendents. I need the support of a few more noble houses, but which ones should I bring to the enchanted woodlands?" The elven kingdom had remained hidden for decades or even over a century. If he brought the wrong kind of people, the location of their kingdom would be exposed and they might be targeted by evil humans. House Paxley should be trustworthy. There is Lord Smith's house Heinrich too. I need one more household. Should I ask for Baron Argus's help? The old baron had already sworn to follow his lead, but he was a crafty old man, so Alaric was quite cautious about him. There were other choices, but he still hadn't fully trusted them. If only I could convince father to join, then things would be a lot easier, but there would be no one left to protect the estate and the town. There is Sir William too. William and the mercenary group who had chosen to follow him was yet to formally join the household, so he couldn't command them at will. Alaric was in a dilemma. Ivana quietly waited for him to make the decision. She was a bit nervous that he would reject her request. Alaric let out a deep breath. I will discuss this with my father first. I cannot mobilize a large number of troops without his approval. I understand. Ivana nodded. Follow me. I will take you to see him, said Alaric as he stood up. Chapter 185, Lucas's Decision. Inside the Baron's study, Alaric and Ivana sat next to each other as they explained the situation to Lucas. Meanwhile, Neo was quietly standing behind them, looking completely still. I get the gist of it. So you want my house Silversword to help your kingdom repel those goblins, but why should I agree? Lucas stared deeply at the elven princess. He was already aware of her identity, but he couldn't care less. His priority was the welfare of his household and the safety of his family. However, if she was willing to compensate them for lending their military power, then he might consider it. Alaric furrowed his eyebrows, but he didn't say anything. He was just an heir and the final decision remained in his father's hands. Ivana took a deep breath before she responded. If you can help us defeat the goblin colony, I promise you that all the beast soul crystals we collect will be given to you. She could still make this decision as the princess of the Greenwood Kingdom. Hearing this, Lucas rubbed his chin. During the orc subjugation, they managed to collect a large number of beast soul crystals. Although a majority of them were distributed to the northern lords, House Silversword took most of the high-ranking crystals. If I could absorb a beast soul crystal on the same level as the Orc King's crystal, I would be one step closer to advancing to the next realm. Alaric gave him the Orc King's beast soul crystal, but he had yet to absorb it. If I can advance to the next realm, I do not have to worry about offending the imperial family anymore. The image of a beautiful woman appeared in his mind. Jade, this might be a chance for me to reunite with you. Thinking of this, Lucas stared at the elven princess and replied. All right. House Silversword will help you defeat those goblins, but you must fulfill your promise. Hearing his words, Ivana was overjoyed. Of course. I guarantee that all the beast soul crystals will be given to you. I promise you this as the princess of the Greenwood Kingdom. Lucas smiled and nodded. Good. He then looked at his son and told him. Gather everyone. We will depart at once. Alaric replied with a nod of his head. Yes, my lord. The Baron waved his hand and dismissed them. A tense atmosphere hung over the Greenwood Kingdom. This was because the goblin colony had gathered more goblin tribes to join them, which greatly bolstered their forces. At this moment, inside the king's treehouse, an urgent meeting was being held. Your Majesty, all the generals and commanders have gathered in this room. Please give us the command to attack those filthy creatures. Elder Dahan expressed his desire to wage war on the goblins. Some high elves frowned at his words, but no one said anything. There were still a few of them who were against the idea of engaging in war, but the king had already spoken, so there was nothing they could do. Garandel nodded, his expression looking stern and serious. The princess promised to bring support here, so let us wait for them before we go to war. A few high elves who supported the war frowned. They were disappointed with the king's indecisiveness. Garandel sensed their dissatisfaction, but he chose to ignore them. He would rather be labeled as a weak king than watch his people die. Please hurry up, Ivana. Your father can't hold back these stubborn elves for long. On the same day, Alaric sent messenger birds to House Paxley and House Heinrich, informing them to bring their armies to Turtle Fort. He also sent a letter to William and told him to guard the cold iron mine with the mercenaries while they were gone. Inside his room, Elena and Hershey were helping him wear his relic-level battle armor. My lord, are you leaving again? Elena stared at him with worried eyes. Alaric turned around and patted her head. I need to help a friend. You mean those elves? Elena blurted out, but she quickly realized that she had misspoken. She covered her mouth and subconsciously glanced at Hershey. I already know about them. Hershey chuckled when she saw her nervous expression. Alaric had already told her about Ivana. At first, she felt jealous when she sensed that Alaric seemed to be interested in her, but she soon learned to accept it. Alaric clicked his tongue as he looked at Elena's innocent face. I will punish you when I return. Elena's shoulders drooped. Yes, my lord. Seeing this, Hershey tapped her shoulders and glared at Alaric. Stop teasing her. She had grown fond of this young maid. Although sometimes clumsy and mischievous, she was sensible and smart. Alaric squeezed her hand and said with a tender gaze. I will take my leave now. Please help me look after the household while I am gone. Hershey's expression softened as she nodded. You can rest assured. I will help the madam in taking care of the household. I will ask Henry and Arthur to stay here. If there is something that they cannot handle, then you must seek help from Sir William. Alaric reminded her. All right. Alaric looked at Elena and said. Elena, stay with Hershey. You will learn a lot from her. Yes, my lord. The little maid nodded. I have said enough. It is time to go. Alaric grabbed his rare steel sword and the custom-made mithril short sword before he left. The two ladies followed him silently. As soon as they stepped out of the main mansion, the warriors of House Silversword had already gathered. However, what surprised Alaric was that Lucas was actually wearing his battle armor, and it seemed that the latter planned to go with them. My lord, are you going with us? Alaric stared at his father with an inquisitive look. Lucas curled his lips as he replied. How could I let you venture into unknown territory without me? Chapter 186, 3 Armies Assembles in Turtle Fort. And so, Lucas led over 200 warriors of House Silversword to Turtle Fort. The formidable lineup stunned the residents of North Pine Town, but their presence also made them feel secure. The former residents of Alverden were also grateful to these warriors, for it was because of them that they were able to get back on their feet. When the army passed by Evergreen Forest, the wild beasts and monsters there trembled in fear. They didn't dare leave their caves, afraid the warriors would kill them. Luckily the weather is cooperative this time, Alaric remarked as he looked at the blue sky. Spring had come and the snow had already melted. Many flowers started blooming, showcasing their bright colors and beauty. The creatures that were hibernating during winter started coming out of their dwellings, but when they sensed the powerful army approaching, they immediately returned to their hiding places. Alaric. A pleasant voice drifted into his ears. He turned his head. What is the matter? He asked. Ivana sighed. I was not able to join your birthday celebration. We went as fast we could, but we made numerous detours to evade the goblin outposts. She explained the experience they had gone through on their way to North Pine Town. Hearing this, Alaric smiled faintly and shook his head. So you are worried that I would be upset? Ivana nodded. Haha. Alaric chuckled. It is fine. I understand your situation. If it was me, I would have done the same. His gentle smile made her heart beat erratically. She immediately lowered her head and hummed in response. Amen. What is going on with me today? Why can't I look at him in the eye? She couldn't understand her emotions. She had never been like this before. Suddenly, she seemed to have recalled something. Oh, I have something for you. She took out something from her clothes and tossed it to Alaric. This is... Alaric was dumbfounded when he realized what she had casually tossed. It was a pearl, but unlike ordinary pearls, the one in his hand was filled with a dense amount of mana. It was so dense that the energy was overflowing through his palm. A mana pearl. A mana pearl was a blessed product of nature. It was a natural resource that could only be found near a mana spring. It usually took years to more than a decade to form a single mana pearl. This was because it only takes form in certain conditions. Many tried to create a synthetic mana pearl, but no one had succeeded. The mana pearl in his hand wasn't that big, but it contained energy that was equivalent to the energy inside a disaster-grade beast soul crystal. The knight seemed to have sensed the energy released by the mana pearl, but Alaric quickly placed it inside his pouch. "Thank you, Ivana." The gift was very precious, but he didn't bother to act like a hypocrite. Ivana smiled when she saw him keep her gift. "Please use it well." "I will." Alaric couldn't see her face because of her hood, but he could sense the joy in her voice. The two chatted along the way so the journey wasn't boring for them. When they were about to cross the borders of Vale, 2 scouts from the city approached them on horseback. Lucas raised his hand, signaling the army to stop moving. The 2 scouts were shocked when they realized that it was Lucas who was leading this army. "My lord, we didn't know it was you. Please forgive our impertinence." The 2 scouts immediately jumped down from their horses and fearfully bowed to Lucas. The Baron was no longer the same person as he was back then. To be precise, House Silversword was no longer just a simple countryside barony. It had become a formidable force, a force that was strong enough to make the whole North worship them with respect. Lucas waved his hand dismissively. "You have not done anything wrong. Relay my words to the garrison commander and the officials of the city. Tell them that we are only passing by and there is no need for them to worry." "Yes, my lord. We will relay your message to them." The 2 scouts responded. "You may leave," Lucas said. Hearing this, the 2 scouts jumped onto their horse and left after giving Lucas another salute. Lucas watched them leave before he gave the command to continue the journey. "Let us go." Meanwhile, Baron Smith Heinrich and Baron Nathan Paxley, who had received Alaric's letter, immediately assembled their armies and headed to Turtle Fort. They didn't even hesitate. To them, House Silversword's instructions were like the Emperor's edict. 5 days passed by in a flash. During these 5 days, Alaric wasn't able to complete his daily missions. It was disheartening for him, but he could only swallow his sorrow. There was no equipment for him to use, so he couldn't perform the weighted exercises. It was the 13th day of April and they were also the last ones to arrive at Turtle Fort. Both House Paxley and House Heinrich were much closer to the fortress city, so they arrived a day earlier. Upon their arrival, the officials and the commander of the fort's soldiers greeted them at the entrance. The officials were literary scholars, so they were just normal humans. Most of them were also acquainted with Lucas. On the other hand, the fort's commander was a formidable figure. He was an old warrior, but he was a peak elite knight. His wrinkled face was covered in scars, a testament to the fierce battles that he had gone through. Rommel, Elite Knight, EXP, 490/500. Potential, C. Traits, Horseback Riding, C. Axe Mastery, C. Hunting, C. Tracking, D. Archery, E. Swordsmanship, E. Close Combat, C. Strength, 221. Stamina, 169. Agility, 180. Endurance, 207. Vitality, 130. Mana, 125. This old man is not weak. Although his vitality and mana are low, his other attributes are high, especially his strength and endurance. The old man was stronger than Arthur and Henry. Only someone like this old man could guard Turtle Fort. The fortress city was the Empire's first line of defense against the creatures from the enchanted woodlands, so a powerful warrior was needed to lead the fort's soldiers. Greetings, Lord Lucas. I am Rommel, the commander of Turtle Fort's armed forces. It's a pleasure to see you. The old man smiled, causing more wrinkles to appear on his face. Lucas nodded. It has been a while, Sir Rommel. How have you been? The old man was also an acquaintance of his and there was a lot to catch up on. The two chatted for over 10 minutes before they decided to continue their conversation inside the city. While Lucas was catching up with his acquaintances, Alaric led the army to meet the soldiers of House Paxley and House Heinrich. Alaric was surprised when he saw that Dylan was part of House Heinrich's army. The guy had a fresh cut on his face which looked like a result of someone punching him hard. Did Lord Smith beat him up again? Alaric chuckled when he thought about this. He remembered that Baron Smith had beaten him up because of what he did during the orc subjugation. It seemed like he had done something to upset his father again. "Greetings, Lord Alaric." Baron Smith cupped his fist as he smiled at him. "Lord Smith." Alaric returned the greeting with a smile. He then turned his gaze to Dylan and nodded at him. "Lord Dylan." Sensing Alaric's teasing smile, Dylan could only helplessly shake his head. On the side of House Paxley, Baron Nathan wasn't present this time. The one leading them was surprisingly Jared Paxley, Nathan's cousin and the garrison commander of Ryvad. During the orc invasion in Alverden, he had sustained severe injuries, but it appeared that he had already recovered. "My lord." Jared gave him a salute. Alaric also saluted the man. This guy was also a true warrior. Despite the overwhelming odds he faced during the orc invasion, he didn't abandon his soldiers and fought relentlessly. "I came here with Lord Theo. He wanted to gain more battle experience, so when he heard that you were assembling troops, he volunteered to follow me here." Jared turned his gaze to his nephew. Theo stepped forward at his uncle's cue and saluted. "Lord Alaric." Alaric smiled at him. This man was Hershey's older brother, so he wanted to maintain a good relationship with him. "Do not be formal with me. We will be family soon." Unlike Liam, who was a pure disappointment, Theo was the exact opposite. He was skilled in managing their territory, so Baron Paxley was satisfied with him. Theo smiled at his words. "By the way, I heard that Lord Lucas is with you, my lord. Where is he?" Baron Smith suddenly asked. "He is catching up with his friends. In the meantime, you guys should follow me. I will tell you the details of the mission." Alaric's expression suddenly turned serious. Chapter 187, Mission, Defeat the Goblin Colony. Alaric brought them to a restaurant and booked a private room that was spacious enough to hold dozens of people. To prevent suspicion, Alaric only brought the key personnel of the two houses inside the private room, including Ivana's group. Upon taking their seats, Alaric scanned the faces of everyone present. He cleared his throat and opened his mouth. "Everyone, thank you for coming here on short notice. As you might have guessed, there is another mission that requires your assistance." Hearing this, no one was surprised. "Our mission this time is to head deeper into the enchanted woodlands and kill the goblins threatening our allies." He paused to observe their reactions and saw that everyone was confused. "My lord, may I speak?" Baron Smith raised his hand. Alaric nodded. "You may." After getting his permission, Baron Smith stood up and said, "My lord, I do not remember us having an ally who lives in the enchanted woodlands. Can you please tell us who you are talking about?" Alaric took a deep breath. The goblin colony had thousands of soldiers, so for them to make a difference, he needed the full support of the two houses. However, to do this, they have to reveal the identity of the elves. He had already spoken with Ivana about this and the elven princess had agreed. After a moment of silence, Alaric responded. "Deep in the enchanted woodlands lies the home of the elves, the Greenwood Kingdom. I have made friends with them recently and now they are asking for our help. I know this may sound selfish, but I want to help them." When he mentioned the elves, everyone had various reactions. Some expressed shock, while others were bewildered. A goblin colony has encroached upon their territory and those filthy creatures have threatened their safety. To defeat those goblins, they want us. Alaric explained the situation to the group. "My lord, can we really trust those elves? From what I know, they hate us humans." Theo suddenly spoke, and his words garnered the agreement of some people. Alaric stared deeply at him and nodded. Indeed, some of them do not like humans, but there are also elves who think differently. He then beckoned to Ivana and her group, signaling for them to step up. "The elves I made friends with are open-minded. If we help them, they promise to give us all the beast soul crystals that would be dropped by the goblins." As he said those words, Ivana's group revealed themselves to the crowd. The moment they removed their hoods, there was a collective gasp of shock. Elves. How beautiful. The warriors of the two houses were stunned upon seeing the beautiful elves. Ivana felt slightly uncomfortable under the curious gazes of the warriors, but she acted indifferently and introduced herself. Hello, everyone. I am Ivana Greenwood, the princess of the Greenwood Kingdom. We protect the forests of the enchanted woodlands, but recently, a goblin colony has set its sights upon our land. There are more than 20,000 of them and most of them can fight. Our Greenwood Kingdom's warriors are brave and skilled, but it would be a tough battle even for us. So I decided to seek help from my friend, Alaric. Everyone became even more surprised when they heard her identity. They couldn't believe that this enchantingly beautiful woman was actually the princess of an elven kingdom. Everyone silently speculated about the relationship between this elven princess and Alaric. They all wondered if she was another wife candidate. They were curious, but no one dared to utter a sound. As Lord Alaric has stated, we are willing to offer all the beast soul crystals that would be dropped by the goblins, including those that would be killed by our elven warriors. On top of that, we will also open our doors for trade. Ivana's words made everyone seriously consider the offer. The mission was difficult, but the rewards she promised were worth every hardship they would face. The beast soul crystals alone were already enough to compensate them. Not to mention getting the opportunity to trade with the elves. As creatures who had lived mostly within the forests of the enchanted woodlands, they possessed many natural resources exclusive to the region. Some of those items were even treated as treasures by some houses. If they had the chance to trade with the elves, they would get their hands on those coveted products of nature. There was a heated discussion between the members of both houses. Ivana and Alaric didn't say anything. They just waited patiently for them to make the decision. Baron Smith was the first one to give his answer. He cupped his fist and stated in a stern voice. Your Highness, my house Heinrich is willing to help the Greenwood Kingdom. Jared Paxley also gave his answer. Our house Paxley is also willing to help the Greenwood Kingdom. Ivana smiled faintly. Both families brought over 100 warriors each. Although they didn't have a transcendent, the quality of their soldiers was very good. Thank you for lending us your support. Ivana gratefully said. Seeing that everyone had already decided, Alaric spoke in a serious tone. Now that everyone has decided, I will tell you what you guys should do once we step out of this restaurant. First, the elves' identities must be kept a secret. I will not tolerate any information leaks regarding their identities. Next. Everyone sensed the coldness in his voice. They knew that they would face his wrath if things went awry. After the meeting, Alaric gave them one last reminder before he dismissed everyone. Just as they left the restaurant, the cyan screen appeared in front of him, notifying him of another mission. ____. Mission, defeat the goblin colony. Mission difficulty, hard. The Greenwood Kingdom has been targeted by a goblin colony. Help them defeat the goblins. Rewards: 1,000 battle points, 30 EXP, 30 stat points, equipment upgrade card X1, random trait upgrade card X1. Penalty for failure: 1,500 battle points, minus 100 EXP. Chapter 188, Battle begins. The armies of the three houses assembled outside Turtle Fort. Everyone had already been informed about the details of the mission, and just like how their lords had reacted, the warriors were also surprised when they learned that the mission involved the elves of the enchanted woodlands. However, they were quick to gather their emotions. At this moment, Lucas mounted his horse and commanded the troops to depart. Move out. As his voice fell, the soldiers urged their horses to move. Meanwhile, in the Greenwood Kingdom, things had become even more tense. Some high elves openly expressed their desire to fight the goblins, but the king rejected their request and told them to wait for Ivana's return. However, they could no longer afford to wait. The faction led by a high elf named Egris took action even without the king's approval. He took his soldiers and left the kingdom to launch an attack on the goblin outposts. Under his fierce leadership, numerous goblin outposts were destroyed, earning them successive victories in just 2 days. The elves who had sided with the king and decided to wait wavered when they heard of the victories of Ygri's troops. Some even discreetly left the king's side and joined Ygri's faction. Because of the betrayal of these elves, the king's faction weakened significantly and even his loyal subordinates were starting to get anxious. Inside the largest treehouse, the king's faction was having a meeting. "Your Majesty, we have waited for over a week now. It is time for us to make a move. We can't let Elder Ygri's take all the credit." Elder Dahan expressed his opinion. Everyone turned their gazes to the king, anxiously waiting for him to make the decision. Garandel sighed. He looked at the elves gathered in the room and said, "Elder Ygri's troops might have successfully conquered a few goblin outposts, but this would only anger the goblin colony. Those creatures are petty and they would use every means to avenge their brethren. If we remain still, Elder Ygri's troops will be in danger. It is time for us to move." Elder Dahan. The elven king glanced at the robust elf. "Your Majesty." Dahan immediately stood up from his seat. "Lead our warriors and help Elder Ygri's troops in destroying the scattered goblin outposts." Garandel commanded with a wave of his sleeves. Dahan saluted and replied with a booming voice. "Yes, Your Majesty." Everyone was excited. The king had finally decided to join the battle. Under the king's orders, Elder Dahan led thousands of elven warriors to attack the surrounding goblin outposts. The fierce offensive of the elven camp brought massive destruction to the goblin colony. In just one day, dozens of goblin outposts were annihilated. However, something happened on the second day after Elder Dahan's troops joined the battle. The goblin colony sent their strongest warriors, an army of over 5,000 goblins led by dozens of goblin chieftains. With the arrival of these fearsome creatures, the elven camp finally suffered defeat, forcing them to retreat and gather their troops. Inside the biggest tent in the temporary camp of the elves, the highest-ranking commanders of the elven army had gathered. "Those damned beasts. I cannot forgive them." An old elf with long golden hair shouted furiously. This high elf was Ygri's. Elder Dahan sneered at his words. "If you guys had not attacked recklessly and followed the king's commands, those elven warriors would not have been killed." The atmosphere became even more intense as the two bigwigs glared at each other. One was a three-ringed beast soul master, while the other one was a transcendent knight. The pressure they exuded was like a heavy mountain that pressed on everyone. "Stop it, the both of you." Another high elf decided to intervene before things escalated. It was a middle-aged-looking elven woman with long golden hair. Her aura wasn't any less compared to the two elders, and it even seemed that she was a bit stronger than them. This woman was Ivana's aunt, Sunset Greenwood. Just like Elder Ygri's, she was also a three-ringed beast soul master. However, her integrated monster traits were more focused on offensive power, so even the arrogant Ygri's was afraid of this woman. "Fighting amongst ourselves will not solve the issue. Our warriors are still fighting out there as we speak, so we must decide on how we should handle those monsters as quickly as possible," she stated with a calm voice. "What do you suggest we should do, Elder Sunset?" Ygri stared deeply at her. Sensing everyone's gazes, Elder Sunset remained calm and indifferent. She looked at everyone's faces before she replied. "We can no longer afford to be divided. We must assemble under one banner to defeat those monsters." As soon as she said those words, everyone narrowed their eyes. "But who will be leading us?" Elder Dahan frowned. Just as Sunset was about to respond, someone stepped inside the tent. "Your Majesty. Your Majesty." Everyone stood up to greet Garandel. They were surprised to see him here. "Am I qualified to lead everyone in this battle?" Garandel spoke with a serious expression. After learning about the defeat of the elven camp, he rushed out of the kingdom to join the army. He couldn't sit still any longer knowing that more and more elves were being sacrificed. Elder Dahan wanted to say something, but then he noticed Elder Sunset staring deeply at him. He felt that if he said something wrong, she would swallow him alive. Elder Ygri's immediately shut his mouth. "I will take your silence as a yes then, Garandel said with a calm look. He sat on the foremost seat and spoke. Elder Dahan, Elder Igris, Elder Sunset, and I will each lead 1,000 elven warriors. We must put a stop to those monsters. Yes, Your Majesty. Yes, Your Majesty. Garandel raised his hand and clenched it as he said. We will depart at once. Everyone erupted into cheers as soon as he said those words. Chapter 189, Pincer Attack, and the Strange Goblin. Under the command of the king, 4 battalions of elven warriors were sent to fight the 5,000 goblins who had recently defeated their troops. The goblins were fast and nimble. They also had superior numbers and knew how to use weapons. However, they had a major flaw. They didn't know how to use the most basic battle formations. Their formation was a mess, so King Garandel planned to use a pincer attack, with 2 battalions attacking each flank. This was to isolate the goblins and prevent them from escaping during the battle. We must succeed. King Garandel's eyes flashed with a glint. Losing wasn't an option. Your Majesty, it is the signal. Elder Dahan pointed at the burning arrow that was shot into the sky. It was the signal from the other side. Once the arrow would explode, the 4 battalions would charge. With a serious expression, Garandel watched the arrow continue to rise into the sky. In the next moment, the arrow reached its peak and exploded with a bang. Bang! Now! Shouted King Garandel as he kicked his horse, urging it to move forward. Elder Dahan raised his weapon, a massive broadsword, and shouted to the troops. Attack! Under their leadership, an army of 2,000 elven warriors charged with unstoppable force, causing the ground to tremble. Kill those filthy goblins and do not let them escape! Shouted Garandel as he took out his spear. Kill the goblins! The elven warriors echoed his words. Their resonating battle cries scared some of the goblin warriors. The unease made them unable to react preemptively. The elves took the opportunity to crush the outermost layer of the goblin army's formation, piercing through without difficulty. Eek! Ike! Eeky! The goblins emitted strange squeaking sounds as many of their brethren fell under the fierce offensive of the elven warriors. Some powerful hobgoblins tried to stop the rampaging elves, but even these evolved goblins couldn't resist the furious elves and were reduced into pools of blood. More and more goblins were killed, but the momentum of the elven warriors gradually slowed down as they engaged with more powerful goblins. Goblin chieftains. Garandel narrowed his eyes when he saw these creatures. These monsters weren't easy to deal with, and it took the combined effort of more than 5 elite knight-level elves to kill one. Push through! The Elven King shouted as he casually killed the goblins that blocked his path. It turned out that Garandel was also a transcendent knight. Furthermore, his spear was a relic-level weapon capable of manipulating rocks. With each wave of his spear, sharp rocks would be released. Whoosh! 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 The goblins who had tried to stop him had their heads burst by the sharp rocks. He was so precise and efficient with his attacks. Even while moving at a fast speed, he was able to accurately headshot the goblins. Suddenly, a robust goblin chieftain appeared up ahead. It had a huge battle axe almost the size of an adult male and a rectangular shield the size of a giant door. King Garandel sneered upon seeing the creature. A mere goblin chieftain thinks that it can stop me? Humph. With a snort, he waved his spear, releasing dozens of sharp rocks that shot toward the goblin chieftain. Bang! 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 A series of fierce bangs echoed as the sharp rocks struck the monster's towering shield. The monster, known for its strength, recoiled from the impact. The shield in its hand was also deformed. The goblin chieftain revealed a look of shock. It brandished its axe, slashing it down toward the Elven King. However, Garandel simply lifted his spear and imbued it with mana. Clang! Sparks flew as the huge axe struck his spear, but Garandel managed to casually deflect it. After deflecting its attack, he urged his horse to leap and thrust his spear. Kishchike. His spear pierced the goblin chieftain's forehead, killing it on the spot. He then kicked its body and sent it crashing to the ground with a heavy thud. While the Elven King was easily killing the goblins, Elder Dahan was even more ferocious. With every brandish of his broadsword, more than 10 goblins would fall. Because of his destructive power, no goblins could come close to him. Those who tried had already been cut in half. Even the fearsome monsters like the goblin chieftains weren't any better. Under his oppressive might, these feared creatures were cut into several pieces. With the leadership of these two transcendents, the right flank of the goblin army was decimated. Hundreds of goblin corpses were scattered across the forest and their casualties were steadily increasing as the battle progressed. Meanwhile, on the left flank, the same thing was happening. Elder Sunset and Elder Egris took charge, causing devastating damage to the goblin army's left flank. It was a scene of carnage. However, something unexpected happened. A powerful and overwhelming aura suddenly descended, stopping the charging elven warriors in place. Everyone subconsciously turned their gazes. To the elven warriors' horror, a more terrifying monster had appeared. It was the size of a human with green but slightly bluish skin. It had a pair of beastly yellow eyes that screamed danger. The strange-looking goblin was holding a bone sword and it wore a complete set of leather armor made from reinforced monster hide. The workmanship of its armor was too sophisticated for it to be made by goblins, so everyone guessed that it must have gotten it from a human that it had killed. Goblin Monarch. Elder Egris exclaimed in shock. A goblin monarch, the final evolutionary form of a goblin. It was a monster at the disaster grade. The goblin monarch tilted its head in his direction and revealed an expression of disgust. High elves. It uttered in the common tongue. Egris felt humiliated, but he didn't dare recklessly attack the monster. This was no longer something that he could handle by himself. Elder Sunset. He looked at the elven woman who was holding a bow that glowed with runic lights. Chapter 190, Goblin Monarch's Incredible Speed. Elder Sunset nodded with a grim look. She sensed that the goblin monarch was quite strange. The mana in its body was like a volatile volcano that was about to explode. Its aura is similar to that of beast soul warriors. Egris should have felt it too. She thought to herself. Suddenly, the goblin monarch made a move. It turned into a blur and lunged at Egris with swift, ghost-like movements. When it swung its bone sword, a chilling aura exploded. Whoosh! A purplish wind blade covered in black smoke shot toward the high elf in a flash. Sensing its attack, Egris snorted. He furiously stomped his foot, summoning multiple thick vines covered in sharp thorns from the ground. The vines slithered like serpents and formed a defensive wall in front of Egris. Bang! The purplish wind blade struck the vines and sliced through a couple of them before it disintegrated into a gooey mess that corroded the remaining vines. Hiss! 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 Egris was stunned when he saw how his vines were corroded. The vines I summon can even trap an elite knight, but that monster actually corroded it with a single wind blade. He couldn't believe his eyes. Just then another wind blade sliced through the air. Damn! I was careless. Egris was horrified. He quickly cast his integrated trait, but before he could summon his vines, the wind blade was neutralized by an arrow. Stay focused, you idiot! Scolded Elder Sunset as she glared at him. Egris' face turned dark, but he didn't retort. He only nodded his head and quickly adjusted his position. He then summoned more vines around him and manipulated them to attack the goblin monarch. Meanwhile, Elder Sunset also released a series of thunder arrows toward the monster. Facing their attacks, the goblin monarch didn't seem to be flustered. It nimbly evaded the thorny vines while deflecting the thunder arrows with its bone sword. Bang! 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 What? Egris was stunned when he saw this. Feeling anxious about the approaching monster, Egris summoned more vines that surrounded him like a defensive wall. The goblin monarch grinned at his futile attempt to protect himself. It then moved in a flash and appeared above Ygritte, but before it could swing its sword, it felt a powerful force coming toward it. The goblin monarch immediately twisted its body. Whoosh! A bigger thunder arrow zoomed past it before it struck a towering tree. Bang! The goblin monarch searched for the culprit that released the arrow, but it failed to find its target. Just then, another thunder arrow came flying from another direction. Whoosh! Found you! Uttered the goblin monarch as it casually deflected the thunder arrow with a wave of its bone sword. It looked in a certain direction, but weirdly enough, there was no one there. The goblin monarch released two purplish wind blades simultaneously. Whoosh! Whoosh! It saw me? Sunset, who was in a camouflaged state, was dumbfounded when she saw the two wind blades coming in her direction. She was forced to reveal herself to avoid the corrosive wind blades. Bang! Bang! The ground where the wind blade struck turned into a patch of black as the grass and plants were corroded. Hiss! 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 Elder Sunset frowned when she saw the destructive power of the corrosive wind blades. Even a transcendent wouldn't be unscathed if struck by that attack. The two high elves fought with all their might, but the goblin monarch remained unharmed. Soon, the two were feeling drained after repeatedly using their integrated monster traits. If this battle continued, they would soon run out of mana and they would be left defenseless against the goblin monarch. Both high elves already realized this earlier, but there was nothing they could do. The monster was just too fast and nimble. They couldn't even catch its shadow. Just as they were about to get exhausted, they sensed two familiar auras approaching them. Garandel and Dahan are here. For the first time, Ygritte felt happy to see these two. The goblin monarch also sensed their arrival. It revealed an annoyed expression and it chose to abandon its targets. You two are lucky. The goblin monarch glared at them before it turned around and left with unmatched speed. Garandel and Dahan appeared next to Sunset. Are you all right, Elder Sunset? The Elven King asked as he checked the state of her body. The mana in her body was unstable, but other than that, she was completely fine. This made Garandel relieved. I am all right, Your Majesty. I just exhausted my mana. Elder Sunset replied. Garandel nodded and turned his head to Ygritte. What monster was that? He didn't see its appearance clearly and it left before they could come close. He only knew that its power was at the disaster grade. Ygritte took a deep breath to calm his nerves before he replied to the king. It was a goblin monarch, my lord. A powerful one at that. Garandel observed the destruction around them and agreed with his words. A goblin monarch. That is indeed a fearsome foe. Thinking about this, his face darkened. Let us talk later. The battle is not over yet. Garandel said while sending Elder Dahan a knowing look. Elder Dahan understood his intentions and nodded without saying a word. He then left to help the elven warriors in cleaning up the remaining goblins. Most goblins managed to retreat because of the goblin monarch, but there were also over 1,000 of them who failed to escape. In just less than 30 minutes, the goblins that weren't able to escape were killed. Their corpses littered the forest floor, dyeing the greenery with red. Collect the beast soul crystals and treat the wounded soldiers. Elder Dahan shouted to the troops. After giving a few more instructions to the elven warriors, he went to find the king and reported the situation to him. Your Majesty, more than half of those monsters managed to escape, but the rest were killed. He reported with a serious voice. Chapter 191, General Rizel and Rosalie Greenwood. The elves won the battle and the king managed to restore his reputation, but Garandel wasn't happy with their victory. The presence of the goblin monarch in the colony weighed heavily on his mind. Just one goblin monarch almost took care of Elder Ygritte and Elder Sunset. If there are more of them, I don't think my Greenwood Kingdom could handle it. The Greenwood Kingdom had 3 3-ringed beast soul masters and 4 transcendent knights. Garandel was afraid that the goblin colony was hiding more goblin monarchs. If there were more than 5 of them, then it would be a disaster. Just thinking about it made him unsettled. After cleaning up the battlefield, Garendel and the elven warriors returned to their kingdom. There was no celebration for their victory and the atmosphere was gloomy. Garendel summoned all the highest-ranking elves of the kingdom to his treehouse for another meeting. This time, no one made a fuss. Even Ygritte, who was usually against the king, was strangely obedient. With the exception of Neo, who was with the princess, all the powerful figures of the elven kingdom had gathered at this treehouse. I believe our messengers had already told you about what happened in the battle, but I will explain the situation for the sake of those who have not been informed. Garendel told everyone what had transpired, including the encounter with the Goblin Monarch and how it had almost killed Elder Sunset and Elder Ygritte. Everyone listened to his words with stern faces. Your Majesty, from your words, are you implying that there could be more Goblin Monarchs in the colony? Asked a white-haired elf with a slender physique. This elf was the commander of the king's guards, General Rizal, a transcendent knight. He was also the king's younger brother. He might look like a weak and helpless elf, but this man was the very example of the quote, "Don't judge a book by its cover." General Rizal was the most skilled swordsman in the kingdom. In terms of pure skill alone, he was miles ahead of Elder Dahan, who mostly relied on his brute strength. This has not been verified yet, but I am mostly certain that there are more Goblin Monarchs in the colony, Garendel replied with a grim tone, his words making everyone feel alarmed. General Rizal frowned. Even he wasn't confident that he could handle a Goblin Monarch on his own. If your Majesty's guess is right, then wouldn't we be in danger if we continue fighting with those monsters? The one who had spoken this time was an elven woman with green hair. She was the fourth transcendent knight of the kingdom and also their strongest warrior, the guardian of the forest, Rosalie Greenwood. She was a warrior who was close to advancing to the next realm, so everyone in the kingdom respected her. She was also the late elven king's younger sister, so she had higher seniority than Garendel, who was the current king. Despite her advanced age, she managed to preserve her youthful appearance. She was almost 2 centuries old, but she looked like someone in her early 30s. Garendel stared at her and nodded as he replied. The moment they set their sights on our Mana Spring, our kingdom was already in danger. Now, we have no choice but to fight them. Rosalie's expression remained unchanged. If Her Highness returns with the human warriors, then things would be more manageable. Elder Dahan suddenly spoke. He was one of the elves who disliked humans, but given the current circumstances, he couldn't afford to be choosy anymore. Just what kind of help can they offer? I don't think a countryside barony can offer us much assistance. Ygritte scoffed in disdain. He just couldn't bring himself to accept help from someone he hated. Elder Ygritte, mind your words. Her Highness is doing her best to get us some help. You should set aside your hatred for once. Elder Sunset glared at him. Ygritte snorted and crossed his arms without saying anything. Silence! Shouted Garendel. He then told them how they should proceed with the battle, but then a messenger suddenly came and reported. Your Majesty, Her Highness has arrived with the human warriors. They are heading to the kingdom as we speak. Hearing this, everyone revealed different emotions. Some were relieved, while others were worried. There were also a few who expressed anger, including Ygritte. All right. You may leave. Garendel waved his hand. He was relieved to hear that his daughter was finally back. He couldn't wait to see her, and he was also curious about the humans that she had brought. Everyone, why don't we meet our guests? He suggested while scanning everyone's faces. A good idea, Your Majesty. I want to see what kind of warriors a small barony has to offer. Ygritte smiled coldly. Everyone present could sense the contempt in his tone. The rest also expressed their desire to see the human warriors. And so, the meeting was temporarily put on hold. The king and the high elves left the treehouse and headed to the central square to wait for the arrival of their visitors. After slightly over an hour of waiting, Ivana's group and the warriors of the 3 houses finally arrived. Ivana was taken aback when she saw her father and the high elves waiting at the central square. She turned her gaze to Alaric and warned him. Alaric, all the high-ranking elves are here including my father. You all must be cautious when speaking with them. Some of these elves do not like humans. Hearing this, Alaric nodded. I understand. We will be careful. He gave his father a knowing glance as he said those words. Ivana looked over to Lucas and said, Lord Lucas, please bring the Transcendent Knights with you. I will introduce you all to the High Elves. Lucas nodded indifferently. All right. He responded. Alaric, you should come too. Ivana smiled at Alaric. Yes, Your Highness, Alaric replied jokingly. Ivana chuckled and shook her head at his teasing look. Chapter 192, Rosalie's Attributes. Ivana brought them to the High Elves and made the introductions. I have returned, everyone. I apologize for making you wait. Ivana exchanged greetings with her father and the High Elves before she introduced the humans she brought. Everyone, this is Lord Lucas. He is the patriarch of House Silversword. This is Sir Galliner. This gentleman is Sir Warwick and this is the heir of House Silversword, Lord Alaric. Garandel and the High Elves were surprised. They didn't expect that a countryside barony in the north actually had 3 Transcendent Knights. These men are powerful, especially that person. Garandel stared deeply at Lucas. He felt a suffocating pressure from him which he only felt when facing Rosalie. It wasn't just him, the rest of the High Elves were also shocked when they sensed Lucas' aura. He had concealed it well, but these High Elves were very sensitive to mana so they quickly discovered Lucas' overwhelming power. So that must be the human who saved her. He is indeed impressive for someone his age. Garandel thought to himself as he looked at Alaric. I know you all are weary from your trip, but the situation is urgent. Please follow us. I will fill you in with the details. The Elven King spoke. All right. Lucas calmly nodded his head. Suddenly, he sensed a sharp gaze directed at him. He turned his head and saw one of the High Elves looking at him with undisguised disgust. That High Elf must be one of those guys that Ivana has mentioned. Lucas thought to himself as he pulled his gaze away from this particular elf. Meanwhile, Galliner approached Alaric and whispered to his ears. My lord, I think these elves despise us. Do you want me to straighten them out? His voice wasn't loud, but everyone was an expert so they heard him clearly. Alaric didn't expect the calm Galliner to say those words. He usually ignored such blatant behavior, but it seemed like he was offended by the arrogance of the elves. Everyone subconsciously stopped in their tracks and the atmosphere slowly became tense. Garandel was about to speak when a mocking voice drifted into his ears. Look at this guy acting tough. Unsurprisingly, it was Igris. Galliner stared at him and uttered while shaking his head. For a 3-ringed beast soul master, your aura is not impressive. What did you say? Igris was furious. Just as things were about to escalate, Rosalie decided to intervene. Igris. Her cold voice sent a shiver down Igris' spine. Other than Elder Sunset, the one he feared the most was this woman. Meanwhile, Alaric tapped Galliner's shoulder. That is enough, Sir Galliner. Galliner realized his mistake and immediately apologized with a bow of his head. I was rude. Garandel immediately stepped in and said. All right, we did not gather here to make enemies. Let us not embarrass ourselves in front of the residents. The situation settled down with the Elven King's words. He then brought everyone to the treehouse and told the humans about the present situation. So there are goblin monarchs in the colony. Alaric frowned upon hearing this information. Before we continue, I just want to tell your majesty that I have already offered them all the beast soul crystals we can get from this battle. Also, Ivana explained what she had promised to House Silversword. When everyone heard this, some elves reacted strongly. Your Highness, trading with them is one thing, but wouldn't it be too much to give them all the beast soul crystals? General Rizel asked with a frown. Some elves agreed with his words. Ivana stared at him and responded with a cold voice. General Rizel, what is more important to you? Our kingdom or those beast soul crystals? General Rizal sensed her displeasure, but he didn't care since those beast soul crystals could provide quite the boost to their warriors. I understand your point, Your Highness. The kingdom is indeed more important, but to protect our land, we need to make our warriors stronger. Those beast soul crystals will be crucial in strengthening our military. General Rizal is right. Why should we give up all the beast soul crystals when they only brought a few hundred soldiers? Igris chimed in. Ivana's eyes flashed with anger. General Rizal spoke with the kingdom in his best interest, but Igris spoke out of spite. Just then, a dagger suddenly flew and struck the table, just a few inches from Igris' hands. Everyone nervously glanced at Rosalie, who had thrown the dagger. One more word from you and my dagger will hit your head next. She spoke in a detached and cold tone. No one dared to say anything, not even the king. As for Igris, his face was drenched in sweat. He felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He could only nervously smile in response. Seeing that he was cooperative, Rosalie turned her gaze toward Ivana and General Rizal. All the beast soul crystals will be given to the humans. She then swept her gaze over the crowd and asked in a flat tone. Are there any objections? No one uttered a word. Seeing how domineering she was, Ivana's eyes flashed with admiration. I will take your silence as a yes. She then moved her gaze to Garandel and told him. Now tell us your plan. Hearing this, Garandel cleared his throat before he opened his mouth. Now that we have gained 3 more transcendent knights. While the Elven King was talking, Alaric secretly used his appraisal trait on the domineering elf. Rosalie Greenwood, Transcendent Knight, EXP, 4901/5000. Potential, B. Traits, Dagger Mastery, S. Close Combat, S. Assassination, S. Horseback Riding, A. Hunting, A. Tracking, A. Intimidation, B. Camouflage, B. Poison Mastery, C. Danger Perception, C. Intuition, D. Strength, 249. Stamina, 249. Agility, 388. Vitality, 184. Endurance, 199. Mana, 217. Rosalie seemed to have sensed his scrutiny and gave him a deep look. This woman is scary strong. Alaric smiled at her, but she ignored him and looked away. Seeing this, Alaric bitterly shook his head. Chapter 193, Secure the Mountain Pass. The next day before the sun had risen, the Elven army together with the army of the 3 northern houses left the kingdom. Their main objective this time was to secure the mountain pass between the kingdom and the goblin colony. It was a strategic location that could give them a huge advantage in the next battle. However, there was one big problem. This mountain pass was guarded by an army of 5,000 goblins, and there might even be another goblin monarch taking charge of them. To secure the mountain pass, they planned to launch a sneak attack on the goblin camp. To do this without being discovered, they needed to move on foot and utilize the forest to camouflage themselves. They covered their armor with leaves and they even smeared their bodies with green paste to mask their smell. At this moment, Alaric was following the battalions led by his father and Neo. They were moving stealthily and no one dared to utter a sound. To communicate, they only used hand signals. We are getting closer. Alaric lifted his head and looked up at the top of the mountain. From his position, he could see the wooden watchtowers and the walls that surrounded the goblin camp. Suddenly, Lucas raised his hand and gestured something while keeping his eyes in a certain direction. 15 enemies are coming. That was what Lucas was telling them through his hand gestures. After informing them about the incoming enemies, Lucas made a series of hand gestures. It was a signal for the archers to prepare for action. The rest of the soldiers crouched as they slowly walked through the dense forest. Meanwhile, the archers nocked their arrows, took aim, and waited for the enemies to arrive. In the next moment, a group of goblin warriors finally came into view. They looked like normal goblin warriors based on their appearance and their aura. As soon as they arrived, Lucas made a snapping sound with his fingers. It was the signal for the archers to release their arrows. Sue! 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 Dozens of arrows were released and struck the oblivious goblin warriors, turning them into sieves. They couldn't even emit a sound as they were killed instantly. Neo and the elven warriors watched this scene without intervening. They wanted to see how the humans would handle the situation, and the results made them satisfied. Neo gave a nod of approval. He felt that they had handled things well. The group took care of the corpses to prevent the goblins at the camp from identifying the scent. After handling the corpses, they silently walked toward the foot of the mountain, where they encountered another group of goblin sentries which were quickly eliminated by the archers. One might wonder why they were being cautious when they had many transcendents. The main reason for this was that they wanted to minimize their casualties as much as possible. The two battalions ascended the mountain. The path was steep and full of sharp rocks, so everyone had to be careful. Once they were over halfway to the top, Lucas nodded to Neo. The high elf understood his intentions and made a series of hand gestures to his subordinates. Meanwhile, Lucas also instructed his subordinates to take out their bows in preparation for the next step of their plan. Now we wait for the signal. Alaric knocked his arrow and aimed at the goblin base camp on top of the mountain. Everyone was waiting for the signal to release the arrow. The signal will be sent by the Elven King himself to make sure that everyone will attack at the same time. Everyone waited with bated breath. A few minutes later, a burning arrow shot into the sky. Now! Lucas and Neo shouted at the same time. As soon as they gave the command, everyone released their arrows. Sue! 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 The sun hadn't risen yet, so the goblins inside the camp failed to notice the incoming arrows. Ike! Eek! Eek! The screams of the goblins soon echoed, but everyone didn't stop from firing their arrows. Everyone didn't stop until they had emptied their quiver. Soon, another burning arrow was released into the sky. It was the signal to commence the third and final step of their plan, to kill the goblins that had survived the barrage of arrows. Charge! Lucas and Neo shouted as they led their battalions to the goblin base camp. Alaric unsheathed his rare steel sword and the custom-made short sword as he charged toward the mountaintop. When they reached the top of the mountain, they saw a large number of goblin corpses nailed to the ground with arrows piercing through their bodies. Some of these goblins were still alive, but Lucas and Neo's battalions quickly put an end to their misery. More enemies inside the camp! Lucas shouted. He then waved his sword, releasing a powerful wind blade that destroyed the wooden gates of the goblin camp. Bang! Inside the camp were more goblin corpses, but many goblin warriors had survived the volley of arrows. Upon seeing the intruders, the scared goblins froze. It was only when the hobgoblins appeared that they managed to gather their wits. Kill them all. Lucas pointed his sword toward the surviving goblins. He didn't sense any powerful aura, so he decided to let his subordinates take care of the remaining monsters. Alaric rushed toward the hobgoblins and brandished the rare steel sword. Whoosh! 2 hobgoblins immediately died in just one swing. He then used the custom-made short sword to deflect the attacks coming his way. Clang! Clang! After casually blocking the attacks, Alaric swung the rare steel sword and released a flurry of attacks. Whoosh! Whoosh! With every swing, multiple goblins were killed. Even the stronger hobgoblins couldn't last a single blow. In just a few seconds, all the goblins and hobgoblins that blocked his path had been killed. Alaric rested while observing as the human and the elven warriors cleared the battlefield. It was an easy victory. Chapter 194, Goblins Employing Traps. The officers of the 4 battalions tasked to secure the mountain pass gathered for a meeting. Now that we have taken over this location, we have the advantage in the upcoming war, said Garandel with a stern look. That is true, but your majesty, do you not find it suspicious? Neo spoke with a baffled expression. What do you mean? The Elven King asked with a frown. Neo took a deep breath before he replied. The mountain pass is supposed to be a strategic point, but the colony didn't even send a single goblin chieftain to protect it. I had my men check the corpses and all of them are goblins and hobgoblins. Hearing this, everyone's faces fell. It was indeed suspicious. The Elven King nodded in agreement. He was also baffled by this arrangement. Why didn't the colony send a powerful goblin to guard the mountain? I think this is a trap. Lucas suddenly spoke. His words made everyone stare at him in surprise. Sensing their gazes, Lucas explained why he had said those words. From the information we gathered, the colony will send their troops here since it is the shortest route toward the kingdom. However, what if that was not their plan all along? While saying those words, he pointed to the path beneath the mountain. That is just your speculation, but if you are right, then it could affect our plans. General Rizel crossed his arms while rubbing his chin. Garandel glanced at General Rizel and instructed. General, send your subordinates to the other battalions and inform them about the situation here. Yes, Your Majesty. General Rizel saluted before he turned around and left. Meanwhile, Alaric just stood there in silence. He looked like he was deep in his thoughts. Are goblins capable of making a diversion tactic like this? That should not be possible. Even the goblin monarchs are not smart enough to formulate this tactic. He found the whole situation strange. Goblins were known for their aggressive behavior and greed, but they were stupid. They didn't even know how to utilize the most basic battle formations. Just what is going on here? Meanwhile, in another strategic location, a fierce battle was taking place between 4 battalions of elves and more than 10,000 goblin warriors. Damn it. We have been fooled. Their real target was not the mountain pass. Elder Igris cursed under his breath as he watched the large number of goblins that had surrounded them. How were they able to come up with this trap? When did the goblins become so smart? Elder Dahan was also stunned. The goblins actually set up a trap for them and they even employed a crescent formation which prevented their troops from retreating. While they were starting to panic, Rosalie sent Sunset a glance and told her. Release the distress signal. Elder Sunset nodded upon hearing her words. She then pulled her bowstring, summoned a thunder arrow, and aimed it toward the sky. She then imbued the thunder arrow with more mana before releasing it into the air. Sue! The huge thunder arrow shot to the clouds before it exploded with a loud boom. Boom! Now, let us break through this encirclement and hold on until reinforcements arrive. Rosalie shouted. Yes, Grand Elder. Under their leadership, they gathered their troops to break the encirclement and create a path for them to retreat. The large swarm of goblins exhausted the elven warriors, but they fought relentlessly, unwilling to surrender to the beasts. Rosalie wielded her daggers with extreme precision and great speed. She moved so fast that it looked like she had turned into a mirage. With her at the front, a small gap was created and the elven warriors fiercely fought to widen this gap, providing them with enough room to escape. Just as they were about to break through the enemy formation, 20 goblin chieftains and 4 goblin monarchs appeared in front of them. The presence of these powerful monsters made them feel alarmed. Igris and Sunset, who had experienced the strength of a goblin monarch, trembled at the sight of the monsters. We are dead. Igris smiled bitterly, his voice shaking with uncertainty. Do not falter. They might be powerful, but they are not invincible. Rosalie's cold voice drifted into their ears, making them regain their sense of clarity. Follow me. I will show you that those monsters bleed too. Rosalie fearlessly lunged at the group of powerful goblins. Seeing this, Dahan and Sunset immediately followed. Damn it. After hesitating for a few seconds, Igris soon followed. Rosalie's figure seemed to have disappeared, and when she reappeared, she was already in front of a goblin monarch who was holding a bone spear. In the next moment, she swung her daggers with unbelievable speed and left afterimages in her wake. Whoosh! 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 The goblin monarch revealed a look of surprise. It lifted its spear to block her daggers, but it wasn't able to react in time. Rosalie's daggers slashed the monster, leaving lacerations all over its body. When she was about to land the finishing blow, she sensed a feeling of danger behind her. She quickly turned her body and saw a giant axe zooming past her face. Bang! The axe failed to hit her and struck the ground hard with a bang. Bang! The goblin monarch who had been slashed by her daggers staggered and let out a groan. I will take care of 2 of them. You guys deal with the remaining 2. Rosalie commanded with a serious voice. Yes, Grand Elder. The 3 elders responded. While they were fighting with the goblin monarchs, their subordinates also engaged with the goblin chieftains in battle. More and more elven warriors fell after being encircled by the monsters. If they couldn't break through this encirclement, they would be trapped and end up being killed. Suddenly, a powerful aura burst forth, and when they turned their heads, they saw a huge human warrior tearing through the goblins' formation. With every swing of his broadsword, more than 10 goblins fell. Chapter 195, On the Verge of Collapse. It's him. So he's that powerful. Elder Egres was stunned when he saw the transcendent human bulldozing his way through the enemy formation. He was like a meat grinder that tore apart the goblins that blocked his path. He swung the 2-handed broadsword with such ease that it looked like he was wielding a light weapon. Not far from this transcendent human was another figure. He was an older warrior wielding a double-bladed spear. Although he wasn't as ferocious as the other guy, he was stable and skilled. He didn't even need to use his mana to kill the goblins. With just a few casual strikes, the goblins fell under his blade. The sudden appearance of these 2 transcendent knights gave hope to the elven warriors. Our reinforcements are here. Quickly head toward them. Rosalie shouted to the elven warriors. Hearing her words, the elven warriors didn't hesitate. They released their remaining mana, strengthening themselves for this final push. At this moment, Rosalie was still occupied by the 2 goblin monarchs. Both monsters were formidable, so she couldn't afford to be careless. Meanwhile, Elder Sunset, Elder Egres, and Elder Dahan were fighting with the other 2 goblin monarchs. They held the advantage in numbers, but they couldn't even overpower the monsters. Damn! I was distracted. Elder Egres retracted his gaze from Galliner and focused his attention on the 2 goblin monarchs. With a stomp of his foot, he summoned multiple thorny vines that twisted like serpents as they lunged toward the monsters. The goblin monarchs weren't flustered upon sensing the vines. With just a few slashes of their weapons, the thick vines were cut into pieces and fell to the ground. Damn it! Just how powerful are these monsters? Elder Egres felt a wave of fatigue. He grabbed his aching head and forced himself to stand on his feet. He had depleted his mana and it was causing serious pain to his body, especially to his head. He could feel his heart throbbing erratically. Blood leaked out from his nose and he was starting to feel dizzy. Just as he was about to collapse from mana exhaustion, a sharp voice drifted into his ears. Egres. He weakly turned his head while wiping off the blood that was leaking out from his nose. He saw Elder Sunset, staring at him with a worried look. I am fine. His pride wouldn't allow him to look weak in front of her. Elder Sunset appeared at his side to check his condition and she frowned upon discovering that his mana had been depleted. Why? You should have saved some of your mana to protect yourself. Elder Egres scoffed at her words. I am the rear support. How could I let our warriors die? He muttered. Elder Sunset was surprised to hear these words from him. This guy was arrogant and held humans in disdain, but he was caring for his fellow elves. Can you still walk? She asked, her voice softening. Elder Egres nodded, sweat trickling down his face. Stop worrying about me. I can take care of myself. He replied. Elder Sunset stared deeply at him and said. Just stay behind me and recover your mana. We will need your help later. Hearing this, Elder Egres snorted. You don't need to tell me. She no longer bothered with him and focused on supporting Elder Dahan, who was holding back the two goblin monarchs. The poor transcendent elven warrior was already covered in blood. His heavy armor was torn in many places and his mana was also close to exhaustion. He looked even worse than Elder Igris. Just hold on a bit longer, Elder Dahan. Elder Sunset shouted when she noticed his condition. The muscular elf didn't have the energy to respond. He was barely holding on. Just one strong blow was enough to take him down. The goblin monarchs also realized this, so they decided to focus their attacks on him. Under the fierce attacks of the monsters, Elder Dahan could only defend himself. He didn't even bother to go on the offensive. My movements are starting to slow down. I can't hold on anymore. I'm tired. Due to his exhaustion, there was a momentary lapse in his defense which gave the goblin monarchs the chance to land a heavy blow to his abdomen. Arg! Elder Dahan was sent back a few meters and he almost fell to his knees because of the impact. The severe blow broke some of his ribs, making him grimace in pain. Elder Dahan. He heard someone calling out his name, but his vision was starting to get blurry and his hearing was also affected. He spat another mouthful of blood, and this time, he fell to his knees. He clutched his abdomen while keeping his eyes on the approaching goblin monarchs. He let out a weary sigh as he muttered. I'm tired. He could no longer move his arms and standing up seemed so impossible. He tried to circulate his mana, but he could only release wisps of energy which was barely enough to keep his eyes open. Just then, a series of thunder arrows went past him and shot toward the goblin monarchs. Bang! 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 Elder Dahan. Stand up. I will buy you some time to retreat. Elder Dahan heard Elder Sunset's urgent voice, but he couldn't muster an ounce of strength from his body. I'm sorry, Elder Sunset, but my body is no longer listening to me. Dahan, you damn bastard. Didn't you say that no one could make you fall? Look at you now. Stand up, you idiot. An irritating voice drifted into his ears. Igris, that bastard. Elder Dahan's lips curved upward. Even that guy is cheering me on. He gritted his teeth and pushed his knee, forcing himself to get up. I won't fall here. He shouted, blood trickling down the corner of his lips. With great difficulty, he finally managed to stand up. So painful. His abdomen was screaming in pain and just standing on his feet was taking a great toll on his body. Chapter 196, Goblin Army Retreats. The two goblin monarchs immediately pounced at him while evading the thunder arrows released by Elder Sunset. Bang! 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 Elder Dahan. She shouted in alarm as she watched the scene. Not yet. Shouted Elder Dahan as he lifted his sword to block their attacks. Clang! Clang! As soon as their weapons clashed, Elder Dahan felt like his abdomen was being torn apart. Blood trickled down his lips. He endured the pain with gritted teeth while keeping himself standing. One of the goblin monarchs revealed an annoyed look. It poured mana into its arms and swung its weapon, a two-handed warhammer. Whoosh! Clang! Surprisingly, Elder Dahan still managed to block the warhammer, but everyone could see that he was reaching his limits. The other goblin monarch took the opportunity to stab him with its bone sword, but its attack was deflected by Elder Sunset's thunder arrow. After another round of battle, Elder Dahan fell heavily to the ground after being struck by the goblin monarch's warhammer. Bang! His armor had caved in, putting more pressure on his abdomen. Elder Dahan breathed heavily from exhaustion. He stared at the sky while waiting for his impending death. I tried my best. He thought to himself. At the corner of his eyes, he saw the goblin monarch wielding a sword approach him. It then raised its bone sword while giving him a death stare. Just when it was about to stab his heart, a thorny vine suddenly emerged from the ground and wrapped around his body, squeezing him tightly. Elder Dahan was stunned when he saw this. He knew that it was Elder Egri's strongest integrated monster trait. How? I thought he had exhausted his mana. He weakly turned his head and saw Elder Egris clutching his chest while controlling the thorny vine. The guy's eyes were bloodshot and his skin was showing signs of cracking. Mana overexertion. The cracking of Elder Egri's skin was the result of mana overexertion, and this could lead to severe consequences. Die! Egris shouted as he slammed his hands to the ground, summoning more vines that rushed toward the captured goblin monarch. The vines tightly wrapped around the monster's body, squeezing the life out of it. It tried to escape from the vine's hold, but its arms had already been twisted beyond recognition. While this was happening, the goblin monarch wielding a warhammer tried to help its companion, but it couldn't break the thick vines. A few moments later, the goblin monarch finally died after its spine snapped from the strong constriction of the vines. After killing the monster, Elder Egris wobbled before he collapsed to the ground. Egris. Elder Sunset wanted to help him, but Elder Dahan was also in danger since one of the goblin monarchs was still alive. She immediately commanded an elven warrior to carry Elder Egris away. She then rushed to Elder Dahan's side to check his condition. He is breathing, but he is in terrible condition. She frowned. She quickly grabbed Elder Dahan and retreated to the side. Whoosh! Bang! A warhammer struck the ground, sending stones and dirt flying in all directions. Elder Sunset was alarmed. If she hadn't reacted in time, they would have been turned into meat paste. Now that she was carrying Elder Dahan, she could no longer use her bow. Damn it! We need help here. She ran as fast as she could, but the goblin monarch still caught up to her. It appeared before her, staring at her with its beastly eyes. Despicable elves! I will kill you all! The goblin monarch bellowed before it rushed toward her while lifting its warhammer. Upon gaining momentum, it swung its warhammer. Whoosh! Before it could hit them, a figure appeared in front of her and blocked the warhammer with his broadsword. Clang! Leave this guy to me and retreat. The reinforcements will arrive soon. A calm voice drifted into her ears. Elder Sunset stared at the human warrior's broad back. She felt safe behind him. Be careful, she muttered before she left while carrying Elder Dahan to safety. With the elves gone, Galliner focused his attention on the goblin monarch before him. Sensing his impassive gaze, the monster was unnerved. Its fighting spirit wavered momentarily, which gave Galliner the opportunity to land a deep slash to its chest. The goblin monarch immediately released its mana to strengthen its defenses and to stop the bleeding. In the next moment, the two fought relentlessly, exchanging heavy blows that caused violent shockwaves. Bang! Bang! Clang! Clang! The more they fought, the weaker the goblin monarch had become. It had been fighting with 3 powerful elves earlier, so it had used a huge portion of its mana. Meanwhile, Galliner's blows had become heavier as the battle progressed and it could barely block his attacks. A while later, the monster lost its footing and Galliner took advantage of this. He lunged toward the creature and hacked its body with one heavy blow. The goblin monarch tried to defend itself, but with its weakened mana, it was unable to block Galliner's full-powered strike. Galliner's broadsword cut through the goblin monarch's body, slicing it in half. After killing the monster, he didn't spare its corpse a second glance and went to help Rosalie, who was surrounded by 2 goblin monarchs, 4 goblin chieftains, and more than 10 hobgoblins. As if sensing his presence, the goblin monarch made a strange squeaking sound. Ike! Eek! Eek! The goblin army reacted to his call. They abandoned their targets and retreated without hesitation. Galliner frowned as he watched the goblins retreat. Did it sense our reinforcements? He thought to himself. Just then, he felt the ground trembling and the sound of the horses galloping echoed across the grasslands. It was their reinforcements, but they had come too late. The enemies had already retreated. Thank you for your help. Rosalie approached him and gave him a grateful nod. "Mn," Galliner grunted in response. Chapter 197, Elder Sunset Speculation. By the time the reinforcements arrived, the goblin army had already retreated. King Garandel's face fell when he saw the corpses of hundreds of elven warriors scattered all over the grassland. He felt a wave of sorrow. He was even familiar with some of those who had died. He could remember his conversations with them, and it made him even more heartbroken. "Your Majesty." An elven warrior rushed to his side with an anxious look. King Garandel raised an eyebrow as he glanced at him. "Your Majesty, Elder Dahan is severely wounded and Elder Igris has overexerted his mana," the elven warrior reported. Hearing this, King Garandel's eyes widened. "Where are they?" He was stunned, but he had to maintain the dignity of a king. "They are receiving treatment from the Beast Soul warriors with healing integrated monster traits," the elven warrior replied. King Garandel nodded. He then turned his gaze to Neo and instructed him. "Elder Neo, gather 20 of our best riders and chase after the goblins at a safe distance. We must find out where they are hiding. Once you discover their camp, return at once." Neo acknowledged the command with a nod of his head. "Yes, Your Majesty." He didn't linger any further and left after choosing 20 riders. Meanwhile, King Garandel followed the elven warrior to check on Elder Dahan and Elder Igris' condition. They were being treated by 2 Beast Soul warriors with healing traits. "Your Majesty." Elder Sunset was the first one to notice his arrival. Everyone immediately greeted the king, even those who were injured wanted to get up to greet him. However, King Garandel immediately waved his hand and said, "At ease, everyone." He looked at Elder Sunset and nodded to her before he asked, "How are they doing?" Elder Sunset sighed while shaking her head. "It is not good, Your Majesty." Elder Dahan broke some of his ribs and he almost depleted his mana. He also sustained numerous injuries in his body. He is still conscious, but he is in extreme pain. As for Elder Igris, his condition is much worse. He had overexerted his mana and he lost consciousness after killing a goblin monarch. King Garandel's expression hardened. He knew that it was fatal for a Beast Soul warrior to overexert their mana. The Elven King took a deep breath to calm his nerves. "We have been duped by those goblins. Their target was not the mountain pass, but this grassland. This grassland would lead to the western side of the Greenwood Kingdom. It was a longer route since one would have to take a few turns before they could reach the kingdom. Beyond this grassland, the goblins would have to travel to a forest infested by venomous snakes. Because of this, they all thought that the dumb goblins would choose to take the path toward the mountain pass." "How many goblin monarchs did you encounter?" the Elven King asked with a stern face. "There were 4 goblin monarchs," Elder Sunset replied. 4. The Elven King frowned. Goblin monarchs were arrogant monsters and they were even hostile to their kind. While he was in deep thought, Elder Sunset's voice suddenly drifted into his ears. "Your Majesty, is it possible that there is something else commanding those goblin monarchs?" Garandel was stunned. To their knowledge, the goblin monarch was the final evolution form of the goblins. They were monsters with unparalleled physical strength and they also possessed high levels of mana. Furthermore, their intelligence was beyond that of the normal goblins. Now, what if this wasn't the final evolution form of the goblins? Just the thought of it made Garandel horrified. A single goblin monarch was already troublesome. What kind of creature was more powerful than that? That should not be possible. He didn't want to believe that such a creature existed. Elder Sunset furrowed her eyebrows and no longer pursued the matter. It was only speculation on her part and she had no definite proof that it existed. "I think it is possible." A calm voice drifted into their ears. When they turned around, they saw that it was Lucas who had come with the military officers of the human warriors. "What do you mean, Lord Lucas?" King Garandel frowned. Lucas cleared his throat and shook his head as he replied. "I am not saying this to scare you, but I have once read a book about a certain type of creature. The book said that goblin monarchs are merely the failed evolution form of a goblin chieftain. What? Everyone was in disbelief, including Alaric, who had followed his father. He hadn't read anything about this, so he didn't know what Lucas was talking about. If a goblin monarch is merely a failed evolution form, then just how strong is one that has successfully evolved? The book was written by an unknown author, so it was only treated as hearsay, but some scholars believed it to be true. Lucas had read this book in the library of the imperial family. If this war hadn't occurred, he wouldn't have remembered having read that book. Can you describe the creature mentioned in the book? Another person appeared. It was the Grand Elder, Rosalie, who had just patched up her wounds. Lucas stared deeply at her and replied. The creature just looks like a typical goblin monarch, but it is on the slender side. It has pale green skin with red eyes. It has 2 horns on its head and 2 prominent sharp fangs. However, its most striking feature is the pair of wings on its back. Another thing that the book mentioned is the creature's strength. It says that the creature is close to catastrophe grade. Everyone gasped upon hearing this. Catastrophe grade monsters were creatures with unimaginable power. They possessed the strength that could destroy multiple cities. Mission update. ____. Mission: defeat the goblin colony. Mission difficulty: hard, extreme. A powerful creature has emerged in the goblin colony. Defeat the creature and destroy the goblin colony. Rewards: 1,500 battle points, 50 EXP, 50 stat points, equipment upgrade card X1, random trait upgrade card X1. Penalty for failure: 2,000 battle points, minus 200 EXP. Chapter 198, The Goblin's Secret Camp. Alaric was dumbfounded when he saw the changes to his mission. So there is actually something above hard difficulty? All this time, he thought that hard was the highest level of difficulty. Since the mission difficulty was adjusted, this means that the creature my father was talking about really exists. While he was absorbed in his thoughts, everyone was already scared by what Lucas had said. I also hope that this creature does not exist, but we must be prepared for the worst, Lucas remarked with a grim face. Suddenly, King Garendel seemed to have remembered something crucial. Wait. I sent Elder Neo to follow the goblins. Oh no. I sent Elder Neo to follow the escaping goblins to their camp. He no longer bothered to hide his anxiety. This was related to the safety of an important pillar of the kingdom. Everyone's expression changed. I am the fastest here, so I will go and get him. Rosalie volunteered. King Garendel nodded with a heavy look. Please bring them back safely, Grand Elder Rosalie. Rosalie took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. She then turned around and left with great haste. After she left, Garendel shouted. Let us clean up the battlefield before we return to the kingdom. Yes, Your Majesty. Everyone helped with the cleanup to increase the efficiency. The possibility of there being a monster capable of commanding the goblin monarchs made everyone feel unsettled. Meanwhile, Neo's 20-man team had already caught up with the escaping goblin warriors. Just where are these things headed? He thought with a frown. They were about to enter a dangerous marsh inhabited by some of the most poisonous plant species. Few creatures dared to venture into this place. Even highly skilled elven warriors like him were always cautious when passing by this area. This was because there existed a highly dangerous plant that was so toxic that it could kill a transcendent with its venomous thorns. Thinking about this particular plant, Neo gestured at his men to be careful and to always watch their steps. The group had already left their mounts a long time ago, for this place wasn't ideal for riding. Neo marked the trees they had passed by to keep track of their location. They had already ventured deeper into the marshlands, and there was a high chance that they would be lost if they followed the goblins' trail without marking their path. A while later, they finally saw some form of settlement in the middle of the marshlands. The goblins used the trees that thrive in the area to create a simple camp surrounded by fences. Although the structures of the camp were simple, they noticed that there were thousands of goblin warriors staying in this camp. "Go and observe their camp, but make sure that you will not be discovered," Neo commanded in a whispering voice. 10 elven warriors went to separate locations to observe the goblins' secret camp, while the remaining 10 remained. Just then, he suddenly noticed a goblin monarch patrolling near the fences of the camp. He immediately gestured at his men to conceal their aura. The goblin monarchs were very sensitive to mana, so just the slightest fluctuations would be sensed by them. While he was closely observing the goblin's secret camp, a hand suddenly grabbed his shoulder. He turned around and was surprised to see Rosalie. "Grand Elder?" Rosalie made a shushing gesture and said, "We need to go back, Elder Neo. This place is dangerous." Elder Neo frowned. Half of his men had just left, so he couldn't leave. With a shake of his head, he replied, "I can't, Grand Elder. Some of my men are still out there to make some observations on the goblin camp." Rosalie's face darkened. "Elder Neo, this is an order from His Majesty." Neo calmly stared at her and remained firm in his decision. "I know, but I can't just leave my subordinates here." Seeing how stubborn he was, Rosalie felt a little bit annoyed. With a cold voice, she muttered, "The human warriors said that there might be a monster more powerful than a goblin monarch commanding the colony." Hearing this, the faces of Neo and the elven warriors abruptly changed. "What? That's impossible." Neo found it ridiculous. "We will stay here for a while and wait for them to return, but if they are not here within an hour, you must follow me," Rosalie spoke in a non-negotiable tone. Neo took a deep breath before he responded with a nod. "All right." He could only pray that those elven warriors would return within an hour. While they were waiting, Rosalie observed the camp with her powerful vision. She sensed a large number of strong auras. She wanted to make a thorough investigation, but she didn't dare to observe the central parts of the camp. She was afraid that her aura would be noticed by the goblins, so she only inspected the outer parts of the camp. Just the outer layer of the camp, there are already more than 5 goblin monarchs. Though most of them are newly evolved, they are still a huge threat to us. She thought to herself, her expression becoming more unsightly. Although it hadn't been confirmed yet, she felt that there was a high possibility that Lucas was right. There was no way that the arrogant goblin monarchs would coexist this peacefully. An hour passed by just like that, but there was still no news from the elven warriors who had left earlier. Normally, they would be back within 30 minutes, but they had been gone for too long. Neo's face darkened. He felt that an accident had happened. "Elder Neo, we must go back now before it is too late. I think your subordinates have been discovered by the goblins," Rosalie urged him. Hearing this, Neo turned his gaze toward the goblin camp and gritted his teeth. "Let's return." Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. They didn't want to stay in such a dangerous location for too long, especially after they heard Rosalie's words. Chapter 199, Returning to the Greenwood Kingdom. After making the decision, Neo and Rosalie returned to the grassland with the remaining 10 elven warriors. The mood was heavy, so no one spoke along the way. As soon as they got to the grassland, Neo and Rosalie reported what they had seen in the marshlands. "Your Majesty, the goblins have set up camp in the marshlands." Neo spoke with a grim look. Until now, he still hoped that the 10 elven warriors they had left behind would return, even though he knew they were most likely dead. "In the marshlands?" Garandel frowned upon hearing this. He didn't expect that the goblins would actually build their camp in such a dangerous location. "So what did you find out? How many goblin warriors are in that camp?" he asked. Rosalie gestured to Neo, signaling to him that she would answer the question. She then looked at the Elven King and said, "I probed the goblins' camp and discovered more than 10,000 goblin warriors. I only observed the outer layer of their camp, so there might be more." Garandel frowned. "It seems like we have underestimated the size of the goblin colony. It turns out that they have more warriors hidden in the marshlands," he muttered. Everyone waited for his decision. Garandel thought for a moment before he spoke. Let's go back to the kingdom. We need to make some changes in our strategy. With Dahan and Igris in critical condition, their military power was significantly weakened. Not to mention that many of their elite elven warriors had also fallen. Yes, Your Majesty. No one disagreed with the Elven King's decision. They also believed that it was wise to retreat given the losses that they had suffered. Forcing the attack would only lead to even greater casualties. The army created makeshift wagons using the trees from the nearby forest to transport the wounded soldiers. After cleaning up the battlefield, they returned to the Greenwood Kingdom with gloomy faces. They had won 2 battles, but no one was in the mood to celebrate. The fear of an even greater foe weighed heavily upon them. 2 days later, all the highest-ranking officers had gathered for an urgent meeting in the Elven King's treehouse. Alaric was also invited to the meeting, but because he was only an elite knight, he had no right to participate in the discussion. Just like the other officers present, his role was only to listen and later inform his subordinates about what the higher-ups would decide. Alaric had no objections to the arrangements. What should we do, Your Majesty? We can't let our soldiers step into the marshlands. Who knows what kind of poisonous plants are there? Sending our warriors there is no different than letting them go to commit suicide. There was a fierce discussion between the Transcendent Knights and the 3-ringed beast soul masters. Meanwhile, Lucas, Warwick, and Galliner were silent the entire time. They only responded when someone asked them questions, but other than those instances, they didn't speak a word. Silence! Shouted Garandel, his face looking grim. He then turned his gaze to Lucas and asked, "Do you have any opinion, Lord Lucas?" Everyone looked at him with serious faces. Although they had yet to see his power, they didn't dare take him lightly. Lucas rubbed his chin. Strategizing wasn't his strongest suit, but he still had plenty of experience in large-scale warfare. With their current situation, initiating the attack was simply a foolish move. He stood up and pointed at the battle map where the marshlands were located. Our warriors are more skilled in land warfare and we prefer to fight as a cavalry. However, we cannot utilize our full potential in this location. In addition, your elven warriors are more adept at fighting in the forest with dense vegetation, but we can't make use of the trees in the marshlands due to the presence of the poisonous plants. In short, attacking the goblin camp will be disastrous for our army. Some people agreed with his words, while some contemplated deeply without revealing their emotions. Here is what we can do. Lucas moved his finger to the area next to the marshlands. It was a dense forest inhabited by numerous wild beasts and monsters. We can set up a trap here since this is the only safe exit from the marshlands. Furthermore, the forest is the perfect place for the elven warriors to showcase their abilities. Lucas told them his suggestion. Hearing this, Garandel drummed his fingers on the table, seemingly in deep thought. His suggestion is straightforward, but it is also the best option for us. He was silent for a moment before he opened his mouth. Is there anyone else with a better solution? He scanned the people gathered, but no one spoke up. In that case, we will proceed with Lord Lucas' suggestion. They discussed more about what kind of traps they would use and how they would distribute their forces. An hour later, the meeting finally concluded. When Alaric stepped out of the treehouse, he saw Ivana standing outside with a few elven ladies. She smiled upon seeing him, while he smiled back in response. They didn't say anything to each other, but they felt like they had interacted with their eyes. Don't you want to talk with her? Lucas' voice drifted into his ears. Alaric was taken aback. What are you talking about, my lord? He forced a smile. Lucas gave him a knowing glance and snorted. Stop acting innocent. Alaric could only shake his head with a nervous chuckle. Let us talk about this when everything is over. Lucas no longer pursued the matter and headed to the treehouse arranged for him. Meanwhile, Alaric also headed to his treehouse. Now that a more powerful enemy has emerged, I cannot afford to relax anymore. It is time to use that equipment upgrade card. Thinking about this, a notification appeared in front of him. Do you want to use your equipment upgrade card on the selected item? Yes, no. I can actually use it on this. Chapter 200, Epic Battle Armor. Alaric clicked, yes. Congratulations. You have upgraded your rare battle armor to Epic Battle Armor. Epic Battle Armor. Defense, 50. Durability, 50. There was no noticeable change in the appearance of the battle armor, but Alaric, who was wearing it, felt the sudden change in its weight and flexibility. Before the upgrade, the armor was a bit heavier. It was also a bit more difficult to move around, especially when he made abrupt turns and twists. However, those minor issues have been resolved. Wow. It almost feels like I am just wearing a thick layer of clothes. It feels so comfortable to wear with no hint of awkwardness. He was satisfied with the improvement in his battle armor. Just the improved flexibility was already impressive. Let us test out the armor's durability. Maybe there are some changes in the engraved ability too. He couldn't wait to test it out. He unsheathed his custom-made short sword and tried stabbing through the armor with minimal force. When the sword's blade touched the armor, it slid off without even leaving a mark on the surface. Alaric applied more strength to the sword, but the same thing happened. Amazing! He exclaimed in his heart, his eyes shining with delight. What if I apply mana to the short sword? Will it remain undamaged? Thinking about this, Alaric imbued mana into the short sword and slashed his left arm guard. Clang! A dull clang echoed after the short sword struck his arm guard, but when he lifted the short sword, he discovered no damage on the arm guard. Unbelievable. He had already imbued mana into that attack, but the sword didn't even leave a scratch on the armor. I haven't even used the armor's engraved ability, but it managed to withstand the short sword's power. What if I use my rare steel sword? The rare steel sword was a relic-level weapon, and it also possessed an engraved ability which significantly increased its sharpness and power. Alaric made the same test. He swung his rare steel sword at his arm guard. Clang! Surprisingly, there was still no dent or even a scratch on the armor. This time, Alaric imbued the rare steel sword with mana, but without using the engraved ability of the sword. Clang! Alaric felt a light pain in his arm due to the impact, but there was still no damage on the armor except for a small white mark that quickly disappeared after a few seconds. What? This armor is actually capable of self-repair. This must be the new ability of the armor. He was ecstatic. Now, he had more confidence in the upcoming battle. I should let my father use this armor since he will be the one fighting with that terrible monster. He thought to himself. He wasn't stupid enough to believe that he had become invincible just because he had upgraded his battle armor. The power of a goblin monarch might not be enough to break the armor, but the force would still leave him critically wounded or even kill him. After a night of rest, the elven and human warriors left the kingdom to set up the traps. They made sure that there were no goblins nearby when they were setting up everything. The elves weren't proficient in this field, so it was mostly the human warriors who did most of the work. This was because they thought that it was despicable to lay down traps. However, the elves were surprisingly amenable to the task. Perhaps their hatred for the goblins weighed heavier than keeping their chivalry. It was already nightfall when they had completed the task. Now, all they needed to do was wait for the goblins to fall into their trap. At this moment, the elven warriors were hidden on top of the trees, observing the surroundings as they waited for the goblins to arrive. On the other hand, the human warriors hid behind the thick foliage while keeping their eyes peeled. A few hours later, just when midnight came, they sensed the ground trembling. They are coming. Everyone thought to themselves as they looked in the same direction. It was the entry point of the forest and also the place where the goblin army would pass by. Soon, they finally caught sight of the goblin army. More and more goblin warriors entered the forest. There were so many of them that some of the wild beasts inhabiting the forest left in fear. Hidden behind a big tree, Alaric sent a signal to his subordinates. Their task was to provoke the goblins and make them rush over to their location. After getting his signal, hundreds of human warriors knocked their arrows and released them. Sue. 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 In the next moment, the rain of arrows descended from the sky, killing dozens of unlucky goblin warriors on the spot. The goblin army was startled and there was a moment of confusion on their side which caused them to lose more warriors. The goblin monarchs immediately stepped out to quell the confusion. They commanded the goblin warriors to charge forward and avenge their brethren. Ike! 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 The weird squeaking noises of the goblins echoed through the forest, chilling the hearts of the human and elven warriors. Everyone hardened their hearts, forcing themselves to calm down. Suddenly, huge holes appeared on the ground, causing hundreds of goblins to fall where sharp spikes were waiting for them at the bottom. Ike! 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 The goblins emitted pained squeaks and squeals, but this didn't stop their army from charging towards the human warriors hidden in the dense vegetation. What foolish creatures! Alaric sneered in his mind when he saw the goblins mindlessly charging despite the heavy casualties they had suffered. He didn't waste any time and made a whistling sound, signaling their retreat. As soon as he made the signal, everyone left without hesitation. It is our turn now, thought Sunset, who was hiding on top of the trees. She then made a sharp sound to signal the next step of their plan.